You, sir, are an idiot.
Now I'm going to get to building the engine for the Honda. Now, the engine has been completely dismantled, cleaned. I used oven cleaner, and then I painted it after masking off all the machine surfaces. Now the cylinders have been honed using a flex hone in order to get the correct crosshatch within the cylinders. Now I'm putting the rings onto the pistons. The brand I like to use is Federal Sealed Power. These are simply a quality ring. They're not the most expensive, they're by far not the cheapest, but I find they're the most reliable. And that's what you want, right? In an engine that you're going to be rebuilding, you want reliability, you want a quality ring. Sealed power is the way to go. Now, when you open the box for the first time, do not open it on the side, do not open it at the bottom, do not cut it open. You always want to open it from the top. The reason I say always open it from the top is because when you do, inside you will see the rings are sectioned off into 3 compartments: top ring, bottom ring, and oil expansion rings. And if you notice, the tabs actually tell you bottom ring, top groove, second groove. So don't just dump them out of the box. Keep them in the box. This will keep them organized. This will keep them from getting damaged, getting lost. Now this is not an ad for Federal Mogul. This is not an ad for Sealed Power. I'm not sponsored by anyone. I'm simply saying this is what I like to use, and it's always worked for me. I've built big block Dodges, small block Chevys, you name it. I always use this brand, and they've never failed me. Another thing I like about the Sealed Power Federal Mogul is when I got the piston rings for this engine, for the Honda, I decided to go with the chromoly ring. Now usually I use just a standard ring, but I got a good deal on the premium quality chromoly rings. Thing was, I wasn't sure what hone to use. Now normally in an engine, when I rebuild it, I take it to a machine shop, they bore it, they hone it. So I wasn't sure what grit of hone. I wasn't sure what hone to use, as in what grit. So I looked on the internet, I searched and searched to see what I could find, and some people said you have to use 600 grit, others said 400, others said 280. What to do? So Federal Mogul actually has a tech line where you call them up and you actually talk to a person. It's not just a recording. You actually talk to somebody. Totally old school, right? So I called them up and I told them what I had. I had the box in hand and I gave them the number right off the box. And he said, okay, yeah, I see what you have. I go, what hone do I use? He said 320. I go, okay. He didn't even hesitate. So he didn't have to look it up. He didn't have to search it. He didn't have to do anything. He just simply said 320. He knew exactly what it was. Local auto supply shops couldn't even get a 320 flex hone. So I went to my old friend eBay and found one like that, no problem. It was here in a couple of days, and I honed the cylinders myself. So now I'm installing the piston rings on the pistons. So now I'm going to be installing the piston rings on the pistons, but the first thing you want to do is make sure the rings have the correct gap. The rings always have to have the correct gap. So if they don't, the ends of the rings can actually touch together, or it can be too far apart. So if the rings are too far apart on the compression rings, that will mean that you're getting a lot of blow-by and you're not getting proper compression, which means you'll be very much down on horsepower. Now if the rings are too close together, that's bad too, because what happens? The rings will actually touch together, right? And this is a really bad thing, because what happens is the rings don't really have a lot of movement inside the piston. They don't really have anywhere to go. So if they get tight together, they wind up doing this and twisting, right? Bending and twisting, which will actually break the piston. Then you're going to be right back here again where you started from. So you got to make sure the piston rings and the gap is actually within. Sure to have a manual or at least know the specs for the engine. what are the gaps, what are the distances, what is it, the torque settings, everything for your particular engine. Fortunately, they do make such a book for this Honda, and I'm seeing that the piston gaps have to be within 0.006 to 0.014, which are any of these. This is for the compression rings, and for this is for the oil rings, so it has to be within any of these settings, which is 0.01 to 0.03. Now, I'm going to start off by doing the compression rings, and then I'll do the oil rings. You want to make sure to put some oil in the cylinder so that the ring doesn't scratch the cylinder. Take the ring and set it in the cylinder. Then you take the piston, and you want to use the one that's actually going to go into that cylinder. So this one, during disassembly, I had marked as number 2. This is cylinder number 2. So you turn it upside down and just push the ring in a little ways. What this does is make sure that the ring is square inside the cylinder bore. Then you take your feeler gauges and you put it in between the ring gap to see exactly what size the gap is. Now the gap has to be anywhere from in between this thick one and this tiny little thin one. So 0.014 all the way down to 0.006. Let's try one in the middle first and just see where we're at. Try 0.009. Okay, that's a little loose, that's good. What you want to do is put the feeler gauge in there and just kind of set it in very gently. If you're feeling any resistance, it should have just a slightest amount of resistance. If it's too tight, then you're actually pushing on the ring. That's giving you a false reading. Okay, that's okay. Using the thickest one right now. Now the 0.014 did fit, but it was really snug. It wouldn't go in all the way, so it's just under, I would say it's, the actual gap is 0.013, which is well within tolerances, well within spec. If it wasn't within tolerances, we would actually have to file down the ring itself by using just a regular file and just moving the ring back and forth. But with this one, it's well within standards, well within spec, so we'll just leave that. Now we just simply remove the ring and go on to the next one. Now, if the ring had been too tight, if the gap was too close together, you actually take just a regular file, you take the ring and just slide it back and forth and remove only a few thou. So you don't have to be very aggressive. Just do it a little bit and then retest the ring. Do a little more and retest the ring until you have it within specs. Now, if the gap's too wide and you've gone too far, you're buying a new set of rings because you're never going to get proper compression. You're never going to get a proper seal. But if it's too tight, like I told you, you can actually break the ring, which would break the piston. So it has to be within standards, which this is. It's 0.013, which is well within the gap standards, gap specs for the 1983 Honda 1500cc. Now the first ring I did was actually the chrome-faced ring. Next I'm going to be doing the regular ring, and this ring actually has a tiny little dot on it to show this way up. So what I'm going to do, even though all I'm doing is just simply testing the ring in the cylinder, I'm still going to have this way up because that is going to be the direction the ring is going to be traveling. Push it down a little ways, gets it nice and square. Now let's try one in the middle, 0.019, 0.009. Lots of play there. Let's go up a little, 0.013. Oh, kind of tight. I'm going to try 0.08. That feels about right. So this one's 0.08, which is well within specs. It shouldn't be any tighter than 0.006, but I found 0.009. It was dragging just a smidge. So this should be just fine. Now with this ring, this is actually the oil expansion ring. You don't have to gap this one. Once installed on the piston, it will actually butt together like so. So this is the one ring you don't bother to gap. Now, these much thinner rings are the oil control rings. So let's put a little more oil in the cylinder. As you can see, I'm not too concerned about getting oil all over the top of the engine deck, as this will be cleaned before the gasket's going to be installed. Now, we're going to go put the ring in the same way we did the compression rings. Now with the oil compression rings, I actually have a separate set of feeler gauges specifically for these rings, as these ones have a much larger tolerance. These ones literally go from 0.035, this big one, all the way down to this thin one of 0.010. So let's see what the gap is here. I'm not sure if you can really see it, but there is a very large gap. Very large gap in the piston ring. Compared to the compression rings, that's quite large. So let's start off with 0.030. That just fits. Yeah, 0.032. So that's 0.032. And that is well within standards, well within specs. So we're fine with that. Do the last one. Seems to fit okay. 0.32. So 0.32 fit in there, but 0.35 would not, which means this gap is probably 0.033 or 0.34, just a little too tight for 0.35, but not quite for 0.32. So that's well within standards, that's well within specs for this engine, so we can go with these rings for sure. Before you install the piston rings onto the piston, something you should do is take an old original piston ring, right? And what you want to do is get all the carbon out of the ring grooves. Now, as you can see, this piston has been thoroughly cleaned to within an inch of its life. This little dot means that the piston goes this direction, in other words, towards the front of the engine. These little dents that you're seeing right here are actually from the valves. Now, in something like a Chevy or a Dodge, Ford, a lot of American engines, they will have these little divots, which are valve reliefs. Hondas don't have these. Why does this one have it? That's because the valves actually came in contact with the piston as the engine was running and made these little dents. This is not good, this is not what you want, but it didn't create any excessive damage as far as destroying the ring lands, as far as going through the bottom of the piston. So I'm going to reuse these pistons. This is not a high performance application, but these are fine. I'm going to live with this. Now, the carbon off the top of the piston is easy to remove, but in these little grooves, everybody has a problem removing the carbon out of these grooves. What I like to do is take an old piston ring, you turn it, and just drag it, just push it through. And you just walk it all the way around the ring, all the way around the ring groove. I like to actually pull. You pull it all the way around. So you got to make sure to hold this with your fingers and just keep going all the way around the ring until you've pulled out all the carbon. Oh, found a tight spot right there. And do that for both the rings and even for the oil rings. As you can see, the ring is actually quite a bit bigger than the oil ring, right? Significantly larger, but you can still get right up into the corners. You want it as clean as possible. Remember the old saying, cleanliness is next to impossible. But you do your best. Pretty much if you see some black carbon, get it out of there. It's got to be gone. Black carbon can build up in these little areas, these little grooves, and what will happen is when the engine's running, the carbon being lighter than the aluminum will actually cause a hot spot and cause the engine to ping under load. Ping under load, it sounds like marbles in a jar. So the engine will actually sound like it's pinging and banging around, and all it is the carbon is causing a hot spot. So as the air and fuel carbonation of air and fuel come in and contact the hot spot, it ignites before the spark plug has its chance to actually set off the ignition. So the ignition's happening as the piston is coming up, it's igniting and causing a ticking and banging sound, which can destroy the ring lands, which can just melt through the pistons, which can destroy your whole engine. So get the carbon out of there. Just get it out of there. No, I've done this 1,000 times. I gotta say, whenever you're installing new pistons onto a new engine, even if you've used the same pistons, the same engine, the same rings, the same everything, read the instructions. Every time, read the instructions. Every set of rings will come with the instructions. Just make sure you read them, check them over, just as a refresher. Most people don't bother. I always do. Check it out just in case, just as a reminder of how to do things correctly. So you start off putting on the oil expansion ring. So let's put on the piston rings now. You always want to start with the oil expansion ring. Simply walk it around. Now if you notice, the two gaps, two ends, are actually connecting right there. I just move it over to that side. Next, you want to put in the top oil ring, not the top compression ring, the top oil ring on top of the top oil ring expander. To do so, you just kind of walk it around. Next, you want to put on the bottom oil expansion ring by walking it around the other direction. Now the ring gaps will have to go in a certain specific spot, but I won't worry about that right now until I'm actually assembling the engine. So next are the two compression rings. So you got the chrome faced ring, which is the top, and then you got the regular standard steel ring, which is the bottom. So in order to install the piston rings correctly, you need the proper piston ring expansion tool. These are really cheap. You can get them at any auto parts store. These ones are actually Sears Craftsman, but you can buy them pretty much anywhere. Now, with the bottom ring, I don't know if you can see it, but see how it has a little dot right there? That indicates this side with the dot goes up. Very important. The ring may appear rectangular, it may appear the same, but it does have to go a certain direction. So dot up. You may see the word top or a little T or the dot. Make sure that goes up. So fit it on. And now the chrome faced ring, if you can see, does not have any dots on either side. Now I double checked the instructions, and with this type ring you can put it in either direction, it doesn't matter. Now if there's no dot, no T, no top, and the instructions say it doesn't matter, then it doesn't matter. So you can put it in either way, but only do that if the instructions say so specifically. There we are, there's the last one. So you do all four of them like that. And I gotta say, I'm glad there's only four. Glad this is only a 4-cylinder, not a V8.